It's time now to talk about WWF WarZone, released for the PlayStation in July 1998. The Acclaim series is definitely polarizing in presentation and in gameplay. People either love these titles or hate them, and now I'll be honest, it's a detail that I'll touch on later, but the main reaction to this title tends to come from whether or not you played literally any other wrestling game that came out either before or after WWF WarZone or Attitude. WCW vs NWO World Tour came out the year prior to this title, and if you've played that or SmackDown, No Mercy, or any of the other WCW AKI titles like Revenge, you're probably going to dislike this game due to its completely different control style from what was established in the AKI titles, as well as an emphasis on slow, realistic, sluggish simulation and a different style of combat, this time spelt with a K. WarZone was developed by Iguana Entertainment, the former Sculptured Software, the people behind WWF Raw, Royal Rumble, Super WrestleMania, and several other titles that I previously mentioned. So these guys do know a thing or two about professional wrestling video games. Not only that, but their focus was also on bringing over several other big name fighting games into the home console market. These included the first 3 Mortal Kombat games. This caught the eye of Acclaim, who brought the company and renamed them as Iguana West, then renamed them again to Iguana Entertainment the following year. Now, based on feedback from wrestling fans, the team behind porting the former arcade games was setting out to create something based on simulation, not quick-based arcade-like action, and they really nailed that idea. There's absolutely nothing fast-paced about WWF WarZone. This, again, was the point. They wanted the game to be truly grounded and realistic, having wrestlers feel heavy and stiff to move and perform various wrestling moves, something that honestly drags the game down entirely. Iguana West, a team of 20 people, looked to the WCW titles that came out around the time and decided to do something entirely different to that of the other companies' offerings. In an interview with PlayStation Magazine Online, Justin Towns, the WWF lead programmer, and Vince Bracken, the game's project manager, both had this to say.
We were trying to do more of a sim, especially compared to what we had done before. And it seems that's what all the wrestling fans really wanted. So that's what we leaned toward. At the same time, we wanted a game to play a little faster than real wrestling. So it would be more fun to play as a game. And we felt that the other wrestling games are a little sluggish, and we didn't want that feeling.
Do you mean sluggish in character response, or do you mean the length of the game? Because certainly the length of the game, while adjustable, seems quite long.
Yeah, both, actually. I would always get bored playing previous wrestling games. I wanted something a little bit faster.
And do you feel like you've achieved the speed you were looking for?
Yes, I think we did. Absolutely. It's a perfect game. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's not slow, there's not a bunch of ridiculous button combinations, the hardcore match is just flawless. We didn't make a shit game at all.
I honestly disagree with what Justin is saying here. I really don't think there's anybody on the face of the earth that would say that WWF WarZone performs faster than the other games out around that time. Though you could say that he nailed down the boring, sluggish simulation style that they were aiming for. So, bonus points, I guess. You did it, good job. Well done, you're a hero. You're the man. Nice work, Justin. It's also worth mentioning that Iguana Entertainment was a team of around 20 people, splitting the team in half to work on each version, the PlayStation and N64 versions. This interview is actually quite a time capsule, as they go into major detail about how the PlayStation offers up so much more in terms of storage for FMVs, music, commentary, better music, and something that would overall be the downfall of the N64 in the coming years, the dependency on the cartridge as a whole. The main menu of WarZone is pretty incredible, basically putting you in a dark, dingy warehouse that could easily be confused for an endgame stage in a Resident Evil game. There's a biography menu which allows you to take a look at wrestlers' models in full 3D, as well as listening to their theme song and taking a look at what their finisher move is. WarZone is also one of the first wrestling games to contain a proper creative wrestler mode. Although other titles allowed for people to edit pre-existing wrestlers, there wasn't anything true like this. This title had a completely crazy random section as well, allowing you to take a look at the truly monstrous things that can be created here, both male and female. The roster here is fairly interesting, giving us the obvious guys like Taker, Owen, Bret Hart, Shamrock, their headbangers Rock, Austin and Kane, as well as 3 versions of Mankind. But Bret's the odd man out here. The Montreal Screwjob, as I mentioned previously, happened in November, so this title was getting released in July, and including Bret is a really weird one. That's an almost 8-month gap between the two events. Now, the worst thing in my mind when it comes to the roster is the weird little details that are essentially missing. For example, HBK's wrist tape is gone. HBK and Brett's hair is either tied up or just very straight, and for whatever reason, through a very CRT, you could probably look past these tiny details. Each wrestler does have their own alternative attire available, which is pretty sweet for the time. It even gives us Kane's badass inverted attire, which may not have even existed in '97. The loading screens into matches are pretty cool looking. They're basically just matchup screens, showing us a render of our selected star and their opponent. I love the charm to these, they're great. Now once a match starts, or is about to start, Vince and JR introduce themselves and go on to introduce the wrestlers that we're playing as.
Welcome to the WarZone. This capacity crowd is on their feet. I'm Vince McMahon.
I'm Jim Ross. It ought to be a great matchup.
From the bowels of hell, Kane.
The sky's the limit for this Crimson Beast.
Bret Hart is one of the most technically sound wrestlers in the sport.
This isn't about popularity. He's the king of the hill.
After the match ends, the wrestler just stands there, and that's it. The wrestler you defeat makes their way out of the ring behind you so the hard cam can see them, and your wrestler may even look over his shoulder in order to get a look at their fallen enemy. It's weird. Where's the music? Why isn't there entrances in versus mode anyways? So strange. The main options in store here for us are the challenge mode, versus mode, tag team mode, cage match, and the weapons match. This was years before table matches in the WWF and only a few years removed from HBK and Scott Hall's ladder match at Mania, so they could have worked on that kind of match for this game. But that honestly would have been a complete and utter train wreck. I can only imagine how difficult that would have been to try and include in this bulky, slow motion, weird title. Challenge mode is where you unlock new attires for wrestlers, as well as cheats and a few new guys. Unfortunately, this is only 2 actual WWF guys, Dude Love and Cactus Jack. The other wrestlers that you unlock are ring crew and trainers, though we'll return to the challenge mode later. There's the one-on-one mode, which is exactly what you think it is. A straightforward one-on-one match, nothing too fishy. A tag team match, which has 2 men taking on another 2-man team, this time with fairly decent reduction in quality of the player models. Weapon matches are hardcore matches, whereas steel cage matches are no rope steel cage matches, for whatever reason, where you can only win by exiting the cage. The challenge mode is a matchup mode where you are tasked with defeating a number of wrestlers, randomly selected from the ones mentioned previously. There's a totally random ranking system, which has guys like Thrasher above guys like Brett, The Rock and Austin for whatever reason. Occasionally, you'll have guys you've already defeated come out of the woodwork and challenge you for a singles match, which could be a weapons match or a cage match, having each WWF superstar standing in a room located in the back of Raccoon City, just meters away from the tyrant, ranting about how they're going to defeat you, and it's a truly good counterpoint, especially when compared to the rants that we saw previously in the WCW titles. After winning the WWF title, you are tasked with defending it, just once, before the challenge mode comes to an end. This title also thankfully includes a practice mode, something that will really come in handy as this game is fairly tricky to pick up. Thankfully, I have my experience with WCW Nitro still fresh in my mind, allowing me to hit some random combinations of buttons to pull off certain moves. Now, something quick on the controls as well that I want to put in here is that WCW Nitro kind of has you hit like up, triangle, circle, X to do a move, whereas this game, WarZone, and I assume Attitude as well following, you kind of just hit like up, down, X, left, right, square. The Tombstone Piledriver, I believe, is up, down, triangle for The Undertaker and down, up, triangle for Kane, which is pretty cool. But that's one of the main differences between this title and WWE Nitro. Nitro will literally have you press a number of different buttons to hit a move, whereas this game is fairly just, the standard left, right, up, triangle instead. Just worth mentioning. WCW World Tour debuted the incredible AKI style control scheme, something that would really stand the test of time going forward, and the control scheme found in WarZone is definitely not that, being almost completely abandoned after the second title in the series, Attitude, but not including the ECW titles. SmackDown and every future wrestling game would do away with the button combinations, and I honestly think that the wrestling world is better for it. Sure, there are people who really do enjoy this type of game, but hitting forward, down, square to hit a DDT instead of just a simple up and circle, or left and X, boggles my mind. I understand that it was 1998 and at the time PlayStation games hadn't even really adapted the whole analog sticks to move the camera style of gameplay yet, but this just never really sat right with me. I felt weird hitting up X circle to score a chokeslam in WCW Nitro, and I felt even odder hitting left, down, right, triangle, circle for a pedigree. Thankfully, WWF WarZone does include a move list in its pause menu, something that WCW did not, which is great. I don't have a mobile phone in the 90s to look up the cheat codes, and although I was subscribed to the official PlayStation magazine, the chance of me happening to have a full list of moves for a wrestling game at the time was pretty slim. Oh, if you have an issue with how the moves translate from real life to the game screen, or how weird they look, that's because nearly every move in this game was motion captured by the Hardy Boys. Just imagine that in your mind. Matt and Jeff Hardy spending the day covered in balls, doing tombstones and choke slams to each other. When entering into a match, you'll see the heads-up display, showing off the opponent's health bar and your own. This of course changes the colour from green to red, depending on the damage that you receive. Now the more that you hit moves, obviously, the higher the chance of winning the match when your opponent's health is in the red. On top of this, the damage bar lets you know just how much damage you're actually doing. Something that this title also has, which I haven't really seen before, is the inclusion of the crowd. The crowd will react to a different range of moves and can give you a damage multiplier, something that is actually a very interesting concept. The crowd will eventually cheer your name out loud, and that will give you said damage modifier. This also plays into the charisma stat of each of the wrestlers. Having a character with a high charisma means they can achieve this stage higher, though obviously will be lacking elsewhere in skills. Now for the moves, there is a move complexity score, with moves being ranked from 1 to 9 on that scale, having moves like a shoulder breaker being the press of just O to execute, and a move like an overhead belly to belly suplex being that of a high ranking move. If you go for a high ranking move and your opponent goes for a low ranking move, they will always win. If your heads up display has your name in a shade of blue and the crowd is behind you, you have a higher chance of pulling off a high ranking move. Each wrestler has their own finisher move, obviously, and is able to hit it as many times as they wish, as long as your opponent is in the red. Though due to the system that I mentioned previously, if you were to hit a move over and over again, the crowd could turn on you, meaning that your opponent could, if smart enough, turn the tide on you by having the crowd completely behind them. I kinda disagree with this. I think it would make more sense for the crowd to pop louder and louder the more Stone Cold hits his stunner, but nonetheless it's an interesting system if you think about it. Kinda like a punishment for winning too hard on your fallen foe. Talking of finisher moves, it's really unclear how much damage a finisher move actually does more than any other move in the game. At Triple H, I hit Ahmed Johnson with 5 straight pedigrees. The first, his stun meter was done, so he just got straight back up. I then hit 3 more straight, and his stun meter wore off again, so he jumped straight back up. So I hit him once again with another pedigree, and went straight for the pin and got the win. Though at that point, I'm pretty sure I could have just done anything and it would have been the end of the match. In another matchup played as Owen Hart, I used the code to call in reinforcements to ringside, which is apparently holding all of the back buttons, right bumper, left trigger, right trigger, and then hitting another button. It was like circle or up or something like that. And this for some reason brought out Ahmed Johnson, who continued to lay out Farouk and then pin him in the middle of the ring, which led to Farouk winning by disqualification. Thanks Ahmed, really helped me out. WarZone being the first title from this game company that would look this way could pretty much be viewed as a prototype. The first attempt from a company at creating something truly different from their arcade past versions. Instead, leaning into their newly found Acclaim ownership and going for a graphically impressive looking title. When compared directly against WWE's recent title though, the wrestler models do look better. Having a JPEG stretched over a model, the look of the other more cartoony wrestlers, and quicker moving animations and movesets, I do honestly think that WCW vs NWO World Tour is the better of the two. When it comes to the gameplay side of things, the AKI titles had you placing your wrestler within arm's reach of your opponent and hitting a move incredibly easily, making this title accessible to everybody who'd be interested in picking it up and playing it. Something that was incredibly important in the early 90s, as most people would head to a friend's house, pick up a wrestling game, play for a little while, and then ask it for Christmas. Or stand in a retail store playing GoldenEye for an entire hour whilst their mum shopped for a new TV. Yes, that story hits a little close from home because that's exactly what happened to me. Around this time period, demo discs, especially on the PlayStation side of things, gave people a feel for what a title would have to offer, and I can only imagine people's opinions upon picking up WWF WarZone for the first time in one of these discs. Personally, as somebody who was subscribed to PlayStation Magazine in the late 90s, and not becoming a wrestling fan until 2000, I don't remember playing the WWF WarZone demo at all. I'm sure it was on the disc, and I'm sure maybe I clicked it, but I just had no interest in it. The gameplay was so stale, and by that point I was already completely brainwashed by Resident Evil and Metal Gear Solid, so WarZone was the first attempt at a fully simulation style wrestling game, and as a first shot, it's not terrible.
There is something to be said though about these Acclaim style games, and it's a tale as old as time. And this is what I've actually heard from people quite a lot. Essentially, if you've played SmackDown, No Mercy, WCW NWO World Tour, then play WarZone afterwards, you're probably going to hate it. Now, as I just explained, I first personally got into wrestling during the late 90s and very early 2000s, so being stuck with a PlayStation, despite asking for an N64, meant that my first real taste of wrestling games that stood out to me was SmackDown, released in 2000. Therefore, by the time I actually bothered to play WarZone or even Attitude, I already had tasted something so sweet. There really is no way to go from one to the other. They just don't compare in any way.
Now we're going to be taking a quick look at the N64 version of WarZone. There are obvious differences in almost every way, apart from the gameplay, which is sadly left untouched. The graphics are different, the soundtrack is radically different, and that's mainly due to the fact that it is a cartridge-based games, so yeah. But the main thing about this title that I really do enjoy is the fact that the loading screens are completely gone, something that also happens in Attitude if you haven't played that title.
The game on the N64 though does look really different. It's smoother. There's like a motion blur put over everything. It's hard to explain. In the same way that the models and textures in WWF World Tour are worse than the PlayStation's offerings, this title on the N64 just has its own charm to it. Almost as though in losing something, it gains something else. In not being a perfectly sharp image, it instead comes across as a better image overall, at least in my eyes. The N64 version also includes a Royal Rumble mode, which is because the N64 has no loading times, and it's actually a seamless version of that match type, something that even the later SmackDown titles on the PlayStation was unable to achieve. There's even the Gauntlet mode, which is exactly the same as the Royal Rumble. The gameplay is exactly the same though. As for the sound in this title, as I say, the PlayStation version is the better of the two. You actually have the commentary and you have the wrestlers talking throughout the matches, which can lead to some very, very, very interesting moments, especially when you're beating up Mankind and he's squealing like a pig.
Mankind can't shake the cobwebs off. King has a real opportunity here.
The other thing worth mentioning in WarZone is the introduction of a female character in a limousine. She basically shows up and taunts the player without moving her mouth. It's really kind of strange. The first time that you're introduced to her, you literally just see her boobs opening a window, which is kind of hilarious. She essentially is just there to kind of insult the player and say, hey, have you seen the champion around? Nah, you probably haven't because you suck. You suck. I guess in Acclaim's mind, they kind of saw like, oh, I know what these nerdy gamers want. They want a hot chick to fight for. So in between certain fights, we'll put in a clip of a woman in a limousine telling you, hey, if you become the champion, I'll be back to pick you up in my sweet limousine. It's very strange. I don't know why they made that decision. It's very strange. I actually do want to say that having no loading screens in WarZone and Attitude is actually like really cool. It's really, really, really cool. It's something that we kind of have to deal with today in like life. I don't know how to explain this. The loading times in the PlayStation version of WarZone and Attitude is pretty long on the original PlayStation. And given that it's the current year and I'm emulating these games on current generation hardware, so to speak, even now the loading times are pretty long. Jumping into Attitude for the N64 though, or WarZone for the N64, having absolutely no load screen is like incredible. Like I cannot go into detail. I cannot stress enough how incredible it genuinely is to just jump straight into a game. Or jump straight into a match in WarZone or Attitude on the N64. It's very, very cool. Yeah, I know it's a tiny detail, but very, very cool. Really enjoyed that aspect of the game. Not having a load screen there. That's a positive for the N64 version. Obviously, the music in the N64 version is almost completely absent. Yeah, there's the theme songs that the wrestlers come out to is basically like an 8-bit tune version, which for 1998 is kind of like a modern approach on making music for the game, if you think about it in that way. But obviously it's just a way to save memory on the cartridge. But there's also something to be said about Stone Cold Steve Austin
lounging the Lou Thesz press, and then immediately telling a wrestler that he just whipped their ass.
Beginning of the end.
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass.
It's something truly special that is kind of missing in wrestling games and hasn't been around for a very long time. That's something I always thought about when playing any recent WWE game. Cactus Jack in Mankind, he was so loud during his matches when beating up opponents. And that's something that's actually really captured in Warzone that isn't present in other wrestling games, even to today.
Turn off the lights. Stone Cold Steve Austin won this match.